right, I'm gonna call the meeting of the Deerfield Elementary School Committee to order at 5 o'clock. This meeting is being recorded. Welcome back, everyone. Happy New Year. Feels like it's been forever already that we've been in January, but it is a new year. First order of business tonight is to review and approve. We have a bunch of minutes. Minutes from October 21st, 2025, October 30th, 2025, November 2025, and November 18th, 2025. Any comments on those?
You want to do them separately, or I think we don't have other ones. Move to approve the minutes of October 21st, 2025, October 30th, 2025, November 20th, 2025, and December 18th, 2025.
Second. Thank you. There's no further conversation. All in favor? Thank you. Next up, the financial statement.
So I realize I did not send you financial reports about midday today. I realized that I think with the holiday I got behind, and then we worked on budget pretty much all afternoon for the presentation tonight. So I owe you reports. With that said, I can state the warrants for the record. They don't have to be in the email, so we'll get them on record here. 46 warrants were signed, totaling $553,820.31. I will email it to you. You're doing minutes. You're doing minutes.
Please.
I'll email it to you. That way you don't have to regurgitate that. There are no new concerns with the fiscal year 26 budget. We probably will have, while I've talked a lot about, we have some overages from salaries because we settled at a higher placeholder than we had in when we built the budget for the contract. I expect that we're going to see some savings. There's been some IA vacancies. There's always unpaid time off, those kinds of things. With that said, I did want to let you know that there was one staffing change. So we had an IA resignation mid-year, and then we had an IA vacancy. And Tina was able to look at the staff and sort of see what the needs are for the students in the building. And we've moved forward with hiring a full specialist on the contract. We're sort of swapping out some wages. I'm saying that because one, we want you to know, but two, it will have 27 impact when we look at the budget because teachers are more expensive than IAs. So we're not exactly swapping dollar for dollar, but based on the needs of the students in the building and the support services that were being provided, it was a position that was necessary. And I will say we had a similar position sort of years ago that transitioned into something less when someone resigned. So we're sort of going back to that original model.
Can you say a little bit more about what an inclusion specialist is specifically?
Yeah, like behavior support, and helping kids. It doesn't have to just be big behavior, but just helping kids to be settled in their classrooms.
And that's someone who's a teacher or someone with who's got like a behavioral background?
The person we hired has a BCBA. But they're on a teacher's count.
That makes sense. Any other questions about that?
One more question. So is it someone who is available to all grades?
Yeah.
Currently, at least.
Yeah, they are also kind of hold a liaison position, so they have kids on their caseload, but is also available to the building, like crisis management, but also has a caseload and also supports students that are not able to be in the classroom.
Wait, sorry, one more question. So I'm just trying to distinguish what that is between a adjustment counselor and then a psychologist. So when you say not in the building, or not in the classroom, it could be like in the building. And could it also be someone who's not even in?
They support like the specialized programming too. So we have students like in the in the DEN or the LEAP program.
Okay.
And then there's students that are in the classroom, but need like a more involved behavioral plan and support. Then there's students that have crisis, like some big feelings that come up, and they might not be even on an IEP. So they're just part of the team.
Tina, would be safe to say that instead of throwing a softball,
Yeah, go ahead.
that
don't think it
when we
gets it.
put in programs like the DEN program and we have increased enrollment in our LEAP program, that this position is necessary to support the teachers in those programs.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
kind of basically where it's
Yeah.
coming from, is that we
Yeah.
built this DEN program and had someone in-house that could do a lot of the skills that this position has, but as an IA,
Mm.
You know, some of the skill set of de-escalation and such, not the license training, but yeah, so, so it's in the long run, it's going to save the district money because we're gonna have the program in-house for, increasing number of kiddos, and we reap the benefits when we're able to tuition in students to that program.
Right.
So.
And it is another adult because typically there's more than one child in crisis in the building at the time. So it's nice to have another,
Also true.
another trained person who can go de-escalate or something.
Well, and I'll be honest on that, my observation on that is Tina's at BCBA and spends a lot of her time doing that de-escalation. And that's wonderful when it saves money, but then you have an administrator who can't support other needs in the building if they have a child in their office.
Yes. Is that another softball?
That was really slow pitch.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Anything else?
Not for the current year.
I sure would more soon. Okay, principal's report.
Yeah, so it's a school improvement plan this time around. I know that, I think I sent it out in November. So just some things to highlight. Over the summer, our instructional team looked at a lot of data sources, student achievement, demographics, survey data, and we created a draft. Then we solicited family feedback through surveys and teacher feedback as well, and school council feedback. Our work was grounded in John Hattie's visible learning. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but we really leaned into collective efficacy for our round for our goals this year and helping us become a stronger team. Some of the parent feedback, just look at this, we got was, it consistently affirmed Deerfield's kind, caring community, strong curriculum and opportunities to see student work. They asked for more consistent communication across grade levels and additional opportunities for student families and staff to connect outside of academics, particularly through evening events. So those priorities were reflected in the family and community engagement objective and the action steps. So our work with collective efficacy, you'll note in school culture and leadership on objective 1, and objective 2, high impact instructional and data driven practices. One of the collective efficacy things, activities that we're working on with staff is ed camps and micro teaching. So ed camps are teacher driven sessions where educators identify topics most relative to their practice, which builds shared ownership. And micro teaching is where staff can share short practical examples. It could be video clips that they're looking for feedback, or video clips where these are things that work for them. So we're building in those pieces. Any questions around it? You'll notice that it has a different format. We copied the strategic plan, thought it was a little bit more family friendly. So hoping that that's true.
All right, we have school improvement plan later on the agenda, so we'll get to the voting on that later, unless you really want to go over it.
I don't know, you might want to get it over with the rest topics.
You can just keep going. If you want, you can just go ahead and you're gonna have to accept it if you want to just, if you want to go and have a discussion now since we opened it. We're gonna go into budget. You're not gonna want to. So, you've already started the conversation on it. I would go ahead and finish up the SIP.
Okay, if that works for everyone, then yeah. Okay, so any questions? Discussion on the school improvement plan? I would say I appreciated the objective, the family and community engagement objective, all the different things that are laid out there. Things like good, helpful.
That's mostly feedback that we get back from communities and learning time events for the families and
It does, as a parent, it seems like I can see that the school's been trained out lately, and it does good.
Like the arts night last year was like packed. Oh my gosh. And then the open house was also a huge hit.
yeah, and math and science night was this year as well. But we're waiting for you to approve it before we get started. No, I'm only kidding. We already started those.
Some of these things are on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was the problem with the one thing with the schedule is that we usually do the student improvement plan and school improvement plan October, November, and so I sent it to you early and said, we're moving on this. None of it is objectable work, you know, but if there's stuff you wanted or didn't see or had questions on, was really where it's at. But school committee does need to approve it.
If there's no further discussion on it, I'll be looking for a motion to approve the school improvement plan.
Motion to approve school improvement.
Second.
All right, all in favor? I vote. Thank you. Okay, and anything else from you, Tina?
That's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, next we have public comments. Nothing. All right. I don't see anyone raising hand online. Okay, next up we have the update on the playground renovation progress.
We got the signed off, excuse me, just today, we got the signed off, trying to think what it was called, but we had to go bring it to the deed, registry of the deeds to put it through. So, with the, provisions that they talked about. You know what, I printed it all out and I didn't bring it, but, so basically we're progressively moving forward. We're going to talk about the funding of it as we talk about budget. We have a meeting today's Tuesday, Thursday. I have two different conservation committees I'm looking at. Tuesday, or it's either Wednesday or Thursday. One of them is Whately, one of them is Deerfield. Just do the final walkthrough of it. I don't understand why they sent us the paperwork of it being complete, even though they still said they had to have one more meeting. So, like I said, I got that this morning. I was a little confused, so I haven't talked to Carlos yet. But so we're kind of lined up to move forward on this, and then the next step will be getting it to go out to bid, which we will do once we figure out the funding of it. And you know, we'll talk about that. You know, I guess we'll talk about that more at the next meeting. But we can also put it out to bid and then not move forward with the project. You know what I mean? It's just going to be cost you $1,000 to. That's the calculation of what was it to put out the last bid. To roughly around $1,000.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's what you lose if you put it out there and, you know, the prices come back too high or, you know, that kind of thing. But
Not to jump ahead on funding, but aside from prices increasing, if you put it out to bid, decide it's too high, wait a while, come back to it later. Are there any constraints with the CPA funds from the town?
we have to do it
Making certain-
within, I believe, 3 years. We definitely have more than 1 year.
3 years from when it was approved?
Yeah.
When you put it out to bid, is it possible to sort of, I don't know how to say this, like, they can give us different figures, like, we can come back to them and say, okay, if we like, don't put this piece of equipment in, how much should that change? So you have to start the whole thing over.
So the way you can, so I hear what you're saying. So you can't negotiate, or else you're cheating the bid process. You got to say what you want. What we could do is we could do add alternates. So what you do is you say, this is the base project, how much to do that? And let's say on this particular one, and pave the basketball court. Like, so you could say that's an add alternate. So they add them all up, and so that you can do the base bid and then say, you know, we're going to do the add alternates or not.
Right.
You know, that kind of thing. So that's,
Needs to just simmer for a while. And I'm not.
if you have projects that may have fluctuation where you want to hold a certain part back,
Right.
you say, well, if we want to do this as well, how much that costs? But usually you start with the base bid.
Well, you have budget coming up next, so.
We
is that a good
do.
Segue.
It's gonna be very
Yeah,
exciting.
Before we get into funding the playground, get into the rest of the budget. But this meeting's gonna be right along.
Darius is going to share the presentation and I will walk you through it. Jump in, please, if I'm stating something incorrectly or not remembering what we talked about a couple of hours ago. All right, so next slide shows our starting point is always level service budget. So that means that we're taking our exact staffing and programs and services from the prior year and replicating it in the new year and adding where necessary COLA increases for our contracts, increases for non-contract staff, any other non-wage adjustments, which you're going to see is a little bit more significant this year than usual, primarily because of health insurance. But we really start at that baseline and just consider COLA for all of our expenditures. So jumping right in, let's see what that looks like for Deerfield Elementary next year. I'm going to give you a moment to look at that number. I can see shock on Mary's face.
Yeah, and can we just kind of
Yep.
preference? So we're going to do things a little bit differently tonight in the sense that we're going to progress through the next phase too, where we're going to offer suggestions on bringing this budget down. The reasons for that is the timeline of this budget puts us in mid to late February. And if we're going to have conversation, actually late February is where our next school committee meeting is. And given the information as we go through. So we're just saying, so there's gonna be a lot of movement of these numbers, but basically the first part of this presentation is like, this is the foundation of where we're starting at. And then we're gonna talk you through about how we bring that down. So she's gonna talk about how she stripped everything out to show you the true cost. And then we're gonna put things back in and then kind of work toward another number. Okay.
Well, and what I want to also say about this is typically we have a part in this process where we talk about new needs and requests, and then maybe that's what we're stripping down. This is level service. So this is not any additional staffing. It's taking this year's staff, which is the majority of our budget is wages. And when you look at these different growth categories here, so this is how the expense categories are broken down, how you guys get your quotes from me. These categories are set by DESE. They come out of the budget in this way and out of the database so that we can report back at the end of the year of what our expenses have been. So instruction is essentially anyone on the ground working with students in the building, but it also includes principal's office staff, principal secretaries, that kind of thing, IAs, teachers, wages and non-wage expenditures. However, what I will say is that budget growth really is primarily related to wages. I don't think there's any non-wage growth under that category. Student services, the growth of almost $64,000 is related to transportation, which I'm going to talk a little bit about more in the presentation, but there's some wages in there because they also lump in the health office staff. So nursing staff is considered a student service, but that's mostly non-wage. Operations and maintenance is minimal. It's your wage increases for anyone that falls in that category, which does include some central office staff that work in facilities and IT. Administration is not administration in the building. That is primarily central office and school committee. So any school committee expenditures, superintendent's office or business office comes in there. That is strictly wages of the $5,000 growth. And then benefits and insurance is self-explanatory. When it comes to benefits and insurance, the important part for us to remember here is that the town covers insurance for school employees. So when we're looking at a $53,000 increase, there's one component under building and liability that the town bills us for the school's portion of their building and liability insurance. We are seeing some minor growth there, but the other major increase here is due to central office health insurance increase, which we're going to talk a little bit further. So we're at about $530,000 at level services.
I'm sorry, can I ask a
Go ahead.
question? Yeah. Could you remind me what we asked for last year? What percent?
It's coming up.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then the salary increases for staff, I was just wondering where the 400,000 came from?
We're going to talk about it right here.
Okay, thank you.
So wage obligations, and I'm seeing that I didn't update that first slide after I updated this today, so I will fix that. 418,000, the previous slide I think says, no, I'm confusing myself. $418,171, which is 7.6% of the 9.64 is strictly going to wages. So the primary growth in our budget is wage driven this year. There's several factors coming into play here. All non-union staff, there is a placeholder in the budget of a 3% COLA. We do have staff that step, even though they're not on a contract. We have salary schedules for all of the different groups. So custodial, school lunch, secretarial. And then the bottom piece is administrative contract renewals. So We've taken into consider anyone that has a automatic placeholder in their contract, or Darius has given me some feedback on where he thinks renewals will be coming in the new year. So that's on the left-hand part of the slide. You can see that the primary driver is our union contract. We have a very healthy contract that we settled on. We're making up a little bit for the current year. You've heard me talk about this with the FY26 budget. The placeholder was not quite enough to meet where we settled. So we're having to make up for that in 27 and add in the new year's growth. So top step is at 4%. If anyone on the Unit A contract is stepping, they will see 6.22%. The third factor on the union contract, which is most significant here in Deerfield, is that we have 10 faculty advancing columns. So they've advanced their degrees, they have additional credits, they may be moving from master's to master's plus 30. The total increase when this happens varies because it depends on where someone is in the salary schedule already for column and for step. So this is pretty significant when you're talking about 10 faculty making that type of movement. And then we have Unit C. All Unit C members are moving up. So we added a step. So the COLA is 2.5%, and then the step is 3%. That's costing us about $44,000. And then summer stipends, we were slightly over budget this year, which we're still analyzing. But if you look at our existing budget report, that is negative funds. So we're making an adjustment to account for that because we do expect that we're going to need that money moving forward as we continue to develop summer programs. So if you go back one slide, what I want to point out is, so if you look instruction first line where it says 402,000, that's just the increase for contractual teachers and IAs. Each of those categories has salaries and wage increases in it that totals the 418,000 on the next page. Does that make sense? Okay. Next slide after this is non-wage expenditures. So non-wage expenses, even though this 2% I think is high for our elementary schools because we don't carry a lot of non-wage expenses that typically see growth, but it is not the primary driver of the budget increase at level services. Two things are impacted here. There was a small COLA increase in our transportation contract. It's a few $1,000s. It's not a lot of money. The majority of that change is coming from where we use rural aid in the current year to supplement the budget. I always add that back in because it's not a guaranteed funding source. So I want us to see what that impact would look like were we not to receive those funds. And then central office health insurance is taken into account there. Like the wages, we're getting hit twofold in this category because there was an October 1st increase. And then we're going to see a projected, we have right now 20% as a placeholder for July 1. So that totals 112,000. So the next slide gives us historical data to answer your question of where we were. And I gave you the dollar amounts as well, because I think that that's even more important to look at than the percentage points in Deerfield in particular. So you can see last year, 3% was 160,000. The year before was the renewal of our transportation contract where we saw that big change in our cost. That's where we came in at 4.65%. Otherwise, Deerfield has been really fortunate. We've had some hard conversations to get our numbers here. We've reduced sections, we've eliminated faculty and staff where needed to, one, make sure that we have the right staffing for enrollment, and two, be fiscally responsible with our budget. So we've been able to come in at that 3-ish% or under for many years. This is really an anomaly for our level service budget to be at this level of 9.46%. Typically, we would talk about the principal's budget and new requests and initiatives at this point, but we do not have anything new to request this year. We did talk behind the scenes about a few different things. It was sort of decided that given the level service budget, we didn't want to put forward any new requests. Tina felt like we could make do with what we have, and we can look at other funding sources. You know, there may be a grant that we don't rely on to supplement the budget that could be used to buy some consumables and things of those natures. There was nothing significant. We were not coming in asking for a new teaching position or anything like that. So there's nothing new, no impact there. However, as Darius mentioned, given the timeline of the budget and some communication that we've already seen from the towns and the 9.46%. We felt like it was important to come into this meeting with some brainstorming ideas to reduce our budget. Normally, we would wait a month, sit on these numbers, and then we would come back and talk. A February 26th meeting and then our public hearing just 2 weeks later is a really tight timeline. And we're already sensitive to the fact that the town is working on their numbers and I think feeling some pressure from the health insurance increase as well. So we're going to talk about what reductions look like in the next couple of slides. So our options to reduce the budget are very limited. We cannot avoid the increase to central office health insurance. We can look at other funding sources. So we added back in the money from rural aid. We know our allocation. We can look at that. Other funding sources that we haven't talked about yet would be primarily looking at school choice. What do we have available in school choice to help offset? The other component is to reduce positions, which ultimately ends up in reducing services because wages is the most significant part of our budget. So what we've done in the next couple of slides, we're going to outline for you is what that would look like if we were to make reductions. I think one of the important pieces to look at when we're talking about reducing services and positions are items that are enrollment driven and items that are budget driven. So the next slide shows you enrollment. Currently, we have 293 students on the October 1st roster. That is because the 6th grade has 55 students. That's going to go away because all of the current 5th graders that will be 6th graders next year, there's only 2 sections of that grade. So we're losing a full class section. So we're going to be going from 293. I have 263 on here, but Tina will likely add a couple of school choice kids here or there, or our kindergarten enrollment. This is based on the census for pre-K and K and where we typically land that class size. So this could really be 265, 268. Bottom line is we're reducing a significant number of students. We're going from 55 in the current 6th grade to 34. So this is where the discussion of what reductions in positions, I know he very much, I can see Carrie smirking. You like this new feature on the Google Meet. He's doing it at all the meetings. So this is when we can have a conversation that says, do we need to reduce a class section? Next slide outlines what we actually are proposing for staffing reductions. So that first piece based on student enrollment, we will naturally decrease 6th grade from 3 sections to 2. It ultimately ends up being an IA position and a teaching position. We did talk today. There is a long-term sub that would transition back to her IA role. So we're not actually eliminating someone's job. And we have at least 1 vacancy in an IA in this building already. So again, not actually cutting someone's job from them. So these are natural things that we should be looking at as part of our budget process. There's things that we have looked at in the past when we reduce sections at other grade levels. So that saves us about 1.79% on the budget. From there, we have to look at actual cuts in programming and services. What we talked about today as possibilities and is still being discussed administratively would be an additional reduction of $185,000. We're not going to get into the nitty gritty of that yet. You know, is it IAs? Is it teachers? Is it related service providers? We're not ready for that conversation. That would definitely be a February discussion, but this at least gives us an idea of what that number looks like. So that would drop off an additional 3.42% from our budget. Next slide shows where these changes get us to. So again, applying rural aid of $79,000, eliminating the 6th grade class section, and then almost $200,000 of additional staffing reductions would bring our budget down to a 2.99% increase over the prior year, or $164,000 roughly. You can see level services versus the reduced budget over fiscal year 26. So we started at the 9.64 at level services, and with those changes are looking at 2.99%. A lot of information, so I'm going to pause for a minute and see what questions you have, and we can flip back if we need to.
What is the, and you may not know this, right off the top of your head, but you're much better at math than I am. What would the, total increase be if we just had the sixth grade classroom in the IA?
So it'd be another 185,000 on top of it. If you go back one slide, Darius. So we'd be taking off, let's call the top line 2% just to keep it even numbers. So our budget's 9.64 at level service. So we're taking out almost 2. So we'd still be at 7-ish,
Gotcha.
little over 7. And no one
Which
wants
is gonna
to,
happen anyway, like that we've known this for like a long time, that we probably 4 years, maybe 3 years, that was eventually gonna go down.
Yeah.
So that was something we were expecting.
and no one wants to have the conversation about reducing staffing and reducing services. But given the state of the budget and given our enrollment, this is a good opportunity for us to have those conversations. There does become a point where you need to right-side your budget for the needs of your community. Sometimes that means adding and sometimes it means reducing, and we're at the point of reducing. If we're going to add at certain years, we have to be able to deduct where needed, so.
But even reducing that sixth grade position, our class size is still well under 20.
Yeah, go up one more to enrollment.
I think that's good too.
Have we been able to look at any capital improvements and delaying those out a year to shave off what we had lined up?
Well, so we don't control, they're different piles of money. It's just that sometimes we pause the conversation in case you have to go into, essentially piles, I should say silos of money, because you're always, the town's always going to have its capital fund and putting things towards improving. And just because they have a bad budget year, they don't stop capital work unless they have a catastrophic year. The reason why we're talking about the school choice, we were kind of pausing about the school choice money toward the playground, is depending on how deep we have to cut. We're going to talk a little bit further that this isn't the request from the finance committee, in which slides still exist.
Yeah, there's a bunch of slides
Okay.
in there, yeah.
So we'll talk about that in a minute. So we're still haven't reached where the finance committee, made our suggestion that we put our budget coming in at, should I just go to that slide?
Well, let's keep moving.
We'll come back around to that.
So
So,
that's our class sizes.
Yes.
yeah, this is next year's.
Based on what we know right now, and I don't know if this changed since October 1st. Ben did have some movement in his enrollment, but this is based on 10/1 of 25. So
Yeah.
by September, there will be, whether it's plus or minus a few
Yeah.
kids, some changes. But we are under
Yeah.
20 students.
So that's
per
stable,
class.
but also take the kindergarten and pre-K numbers as just, those are placeholders right now. There was a little change.
Can I ask a question about the 185? Is that, I'm just wondering where that number came from. Is it, I know you're not ready to talk about any specifics, but did it come from
Projected.
your discussions about that, or did it come from a number that we need to get to? Ideas that you have, is where it came from.
Projected ideas of what we could
Okay.
probably do.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, it wasn't a number we were trying to reach. That was, in fact, it was 299, just happened
Yeah,
to be.
just-
It's like, oh, you got just under 3%. That's how it
That's what I wanted.
kind of worked out. In fact, that number could change slightly. As we go deeper into those numbers, that could be like, could go up to 3.8, go to, or 2.8, those are kind of, right? They were
Yep.
ballpark numbers about where we're going to
All right,
land.
thank you.
And we're decreasing by like 20 or 25 students overall,
Yeah.
right?
Shelley, before we move on, you, on the first slide, when we talked about reductions, you said applying rural aid funding, and you talked about school choice, but that is not reflecting school choice money, correct?
So
Okay,
it,
that's not-
go up, 2 more. So we do use school choice money to offset the budget. So whatever we were using in 26, we're using again in 27, but we did not add any new expenditures to 27. So that is still a conversation that we can have.
We're going to talk about that in a little bit more with those other slides too.
So if we go down to 2 more. All right, so let's look at other funds and expenditures and then our total budgets. So the next slide outlines revolving funds. So this is what Carrie was referring to when asking about school choice. You can see the funds are relatively level from the prior year outside of increased wages. So when you look at school choice and it shows 358,000 from last year and 372,000 in the new year, That is only to account for the COLA and step increases on the contract. It's not a new staff member. Okay, same thing goes down the line there.
Because when she goes in the budget, so Carrie, if you're a teacher, she would say, I'm gonna put Carrie onto school choice. She assigns it to people rather than just a general number of 50,000, we assign it to people. So it's a little bit easier to tracking where the money is going when you look at different personnel people.
Yep.
Okay.
Rural aid, you can see we're using more rural aid in the new year. Last year, I think we used the rest of rural aid to help pay for the front project maybe, or the paving in the back. And the budget was in a much better position, so we didn't need the amount, same amount. This is fully using our rural aid money. There will not be any reserves left there. And the next slide shows you the total budget. When we look at general fund plus revolving funds, and I do have a caveat in here, revolving funds has not taken into consideration any funding for the playground. In my spreadsheets, I have a number in my mind of where, yeah, we have talked about that. But for demonstration purposes and not to skew the numbers, I really wanted you to see the comparison of the prior year to the new year. So we're going from 6.4 roughly million total budget to just over 6.5. And the next slide shows our cost per pupil. This is based on the 293 because again, everything is October 1st. That's how the state calculates chapter 78 as well. And then I do have that note in the bottom left-hand corner. You can see that we have a downward slide compared to 2020 in overall enrollment and in resident enrollment, but it's a little bit harder to see what those numbers actually equate to in the chart. So it is 73 residents and 20 school choice students over 7 school years that we've reduced. So it's fiscally responsible for us to make the changes given the decline in enrollment that we've seen.
2020 school year, we had 386 students. So we'll be down to 265-ish.
Okay, so the rest of the presentation gets into what Darius touched on a little bit. So we did receive an email from Finance Committee that had a request for the school budget to grow at a maximum of 2.5%, including the cost of health insurance for school employees. We're going to break that down a little bit further, but I'm going to let you process that for a minute. This is atypical. The elementary school budgets, none of them have ever covered the cost of health insurance for school employees. I think the town is seeing, like Frontier is, hundreds of thousands of dollars of growth in health insurance between this year's impact and next year's impact. And we don't believe that the school is the only one that is asked to look at things this way. From the email with Julie, she sort of alluded that they're taking this approach with everyone. We also recognize that it's probably worst case scenario, but we wanted to have that conversation and see what that actually looks like. Anything to add before I keep going? Okay, so what does this look like? Let's break it down. So 2.5% growth over fiscal year 26 is only $160,000. Where does that come from? So the town told us that in 2026, school employee health insurance costs $913,000, plus our DES operating budget from the current year of 5.5 million would mean that the total cost to fund the school for health insurance and budget is $6.4 million. 2.5% on top of that is where we get the 160,000. So if we add that to the 6.4 million, our maximum budget could be $6.5 million, including health insurance. Does this make sense?
The next page, I think, explains it when you.
Go ahead. So what does that mean? The cost of projected health insurance for next year, if we take the 913,000 plus what we're projecting for a 20% increase, we're looking at almost $1.1 million in health insurance costs for school employees alone. Maximum school budget, just outlined on the slide before, was 6.5. Let's deduct the health insurance that they're saying we have to include. What does that leave us remaining for our budget? We would have 5.4 million. Our FY26 budget was 5.5 million, so we would be starting in a deficit. We've talked about that reduced budget, which was adding rural aid, reducing a sixth grade classroom, and an additional $185,000 in staffing comes in at 5.6. We would need, if the town pushed us on this and said that this is what has to proceed, we would be looking at additional budget cuts of $187,000 on top of the cuts that we've already talked about.
So I wrote a snippy email back because I could read that really quickly, that we were going to be upside down just in the request alone, because we knew it was about 2.7% increase alone would be health insurance, or I just made that number up on the spot. But when I wrote back, and Julie kind of wrote back, like, I understand that, but that's the request we're putting out there. And so, you know, you guys do what you got to do on your end of doing your work, but that was kind of it. So, they're trying to figure out what they're going to do, all that information. So talking about the budget process, right? So the cherry sheets and such, the governor's budget gets released on Friday morning. And then so all the towns will know what they have for monies coming in. And so it's kind of like let the games begin at that point. Everybody's got their cards up and kind of trying to figure out what's coming and going. The cards kind of get put on the table after Friday, including Frontier. So Frontier is kind of the waiting to see what the assessments are, because when Frontier sits around the table, it also has a huge increase due to health insurance. And to put it in perspective, Frontier increases its budget by around $300,000 a year, between $300,000 and $350,000 a year. Insurance alone, before anything else, is $500,000. So the assessment, the cost of the towns is closer. Their increase is closer to $1 million over. I mean, the Frontier's increase in budget right now is closer to $1 million. We haven't done any work on that budget yet, because we haven't tried to bring that down through reductions, which is probably going to have to be the case. And I've had conversations with the Frontier staff about the fact that they meant to have reductions when they start reading about it. But we had to wait until we see what the assessment numbers are, because you don't know how it's going to affect the town. So you can go cutting hundreds of thousands, and still the assessments can be very high. It's interesting. Assessment's a whole different game in budgeting. So there's that's why that's why Frontier hasn't come out with has not gone into the work of how it's going to get its budget down, is because it wants to see how it reflects the assessment. So we'll have that information on Friday. So everything's going to kind of heat up on Friday. And I've had some side conversations with, town government, and the question of what are they going to do? How much money do they have? The town of Deerfield does have a lot of issues, because they've been funding a lot of things out of free cash instead of putting it on budget, and just kind of depending on free cash every year. It's a bad process to be in. So they're talking about, when do they straighten that out? Is this year to do it, because everybody's going to get hit by insurance? The insurance numbers are also coming out shortly, at sometime in the next week or two. So we'll have an idea of what we've been putting placeholders in. We'll have an idea what the exact ask is going to be. So all that kind of happening at once. So
Essentially, if they needed us to push this forward, we're cutting. It's not even level funding, which we've done in the past, where we've funded at the same year from the prior year, same amount from the prior year. It would require us to.
all right, so let's go through the process and Mary, you can help me out too, because you've done this quite a bit. So let's understand the process, right? So the reason why school committee is separate in the state of Massachusetts is so that schools don't get chopped up without review. And so let's say you say it's unreasonable for us to pick up a health insurance in that same year. And we meet with the town, we have conversations. Next thing will be, we're going to send our preliminary budget over at some point. We'll probably hint it over. This is where we're kind of playing around with trying to get their feedback, let them get it, kind of test the water. And let's say they come back and they say, no, this is absolutely, we're going to go 2.5, and absolutely you're paying for insurance this year. Okay. You can still bring forward a budget where you believe is correct. Okay. But you won't have the endorsement of the finance committee.
Right.
And the question is, will you get the endorsement? You get the 2 votes when you go to town meeting, right? You have the finance committee, and then you also have a select board. So who's going to endorse and who's not? They get to put the number on the warrant. But you can you show up prepared with a sheet of paper and handouts for everybody as to why you're going to increase it on town meeting floor, because this is what, blah, 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 blah. So it's a very hard to do, but it is, I'm just explaining what the process is you don't have to absolutely listen to the finance committee, but we, in our best interest of working together. If we reduce the budget by this much this year, the question is, what happens next year? Because we're gonna get hit. They're saying that the insurance problem is several years in the making. So before we're gonna pull out of this kind of nosedive with insurance. So how far do you decimate the school budget and start taking away programming and then, whatever those effects, those are the conversations we have to have with the town. We don't know the rest of their finances. I have no idea where the police is coming in. I have no idea I have no idea where their asks are and so forth. So there is talk that we are, a conversation that we have to have with the town is how we use school choice. So we built up a reserve of school choice of, close to $1 million, right? And we've been hovering around that $1 million mark by not spending too much more than we're taking in, and keeping it there as reserve. So if something comes up, so let's say we have an out of district placement that shows up. Okay, it's just happened in one of our communities, and all of a sudden we got to find $110,000 middle of the year. If we don't have school choice reserve, then the school committee has to go to the select board and ask them to take it out of free cash. And then they have to do, and then if they have it in free cash, that kind of thing. So there's that kind of level of protection, and we started using it toward capital projects instead of offsetting the budget. The question is that they may think that we're sitting on too much money. And so the question would be, well, how do we bring that number down to what they think it should be at? I would say that, we should be definitely carrying what I call a year in the rear, in the sense that we should always have the amount of money we're spending this year into next year's budget, so that you're never caught. And we have, much more than that. It's a question about how you do finances. Does the school, should the school pay down and then go to the town for money? Or, school choice is an interesting thing because of the way it developed. Not every school has this problem. In fact, most schools don't. Most schools are
And
upside
we may
down.
not have this problem.
And once you burn it down, it's gone. Once you burn it down, it's gone. And as you see, we used to be 3 sections. And remember, we made conscious decisions to reduce the amount of school choice revenue coming in because we're reducing the number of students. So that number is coming down. Some smart things that we did when you built something like the DEN program, you could take it's tuition in or school choice in, but you can take those in and get significant returns on placements there. So building those programs is very financially beneficial to the school district. And so sometimes you get a jump in school choice. Like, how did you realize that? Well, we had a student come in who had additional needs and we were able to bill out for that kind of thing. So I'm kind of bouncing all over the place, but I did hear that the question is, well, how much school choice do you have? And that's one of the questions that will be asked of us. And so I want people to understand that school choice number, kind of where it's at. We were going to, with the spending on the playground, that number at the end of year would be roughly envelope numbers.
It depends on what happens with the playground project. Originally, the placeholder was about 150,000, but it was going to be over multiple years because we were going to do multiple phases. I'm not even sure 150,000 is going to cover the existing plan for the first phase. So if we have $1 million and we go forward with all the playground renovations and we spend 400,000 or 300,000, the math is pretty easy, 600,000 or 700,000. But 2 things. One, Darius said this really quickly. We're already exceeding revenue coming in. Our revenue coming in, for simple math, let's say it's 200,000. Our expenses going out are 350. We're overspending as it stands. And if you can flip back to the enrollment slide, while our class sizes are less than 20 each, we could blow these up and have Tina take in a lot more students, but it changes what our community looks like, especially if we're talking about reducing services. But more importantly, what I want to point out is the next couple of grades have some larger numbers, 6, 8, 9 in first grade. Once those kids graduate out, you're not going to be able to backfill kindergarten with 6 or 8 more new students. You have to have room for your resident enrollment. So Our school choice numbers are naturally going to decline. 2 reasons. One, we've reduced our sections, and you won't be able to take in as many new students as you're pushing out. So right now, as it stands, we're exceeding revenue by $150,000. Revenue is going to continue to come down. We can backfill 3, 8 or 9, not probably doable.
Well, and it's not smart. Well, there's lots of ways to do finances, but it seems less responsible to put wages on school choice and revolving funds, right? So, and the biggest percentage of our cost is wages.
Right.
So just transitioning to that to draw a pot down means we're still gonna have a budget problem.
Correct. So if we're drawing, so let's say we move forward with the playground project, right? That's our kind of wheels in motion. And so then we're at $700,000, right? So we got 7 years before we're out of money, right? I mean, it's reloadings as well, but it's, you know, you're going to bring that down, and then you'd have to eventually.
It's not gonna last that long, but okay.
Okay, so it's not going to last that long, but then you're going to have to go to the town to make up for this, you know, we were spending, you know, as we saw in that budget line. What page is that?
Wait, before you go off of that slide. Finish your thought and come back. to this slide.
Where's the number of, no, that's wrong way. Sorry. Where's the,
Total budget?
right here? I mean, so we're already, this is what we're spending.
Yep.
Within the budget of school choice revenue as it is. So we are offsetting it. So it gets to be a dangerous game. I think it's safer. So the other way of kind of playing with the number, it's all about like shifting numbers and shifting kind of risk within the budget. And so I would argue with the finance committee, okay, we'll reduce the budget here, and then I will ask the town for a warrant to pay for the playground. So you'll just take from free cash, instead of offsetting a budget, you're gonna take from free cash to take care. Instead of we were kind of handling it in the house and using our money conservatively in the sense of, so it's just about like where you kind of put the money and take the money. But essentially, it's that kind of level of risk. And do they want the school to hold the protection within its own budget, right? And so we haven't gone to the town for bailouts, for transportation mid-year, for placements mid-year, for, you know, those kind of things. We've been able to handle all that in-house. So,
And subsidizing capital projects.
and we've had decent, I mean,
One-time payment
and we've had
things.
very good budgets. So I'd be curious as to like, why are you messing with the stew? You know what I mean? Like you got a good group running a solid thing, but I'd love to hear their opinions on, maybe they aren't trying to go there. Maybe I'm reading into it. Maybe they're, you know, maybe the 2.5 coming out there is saying, you know, we're in a slight panic and, you know, we're putting this out there to see what it takes to get there so that everybody looks seriously at their budgets, you know? And so,
I mean, just
I've had
seeing it
2.5
go from
in
9
other
to
towns.
2.99. That's like very good faith,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
at least I'm certain.
And they don't know where we're starting from.
Right.
They don't have all the information. There's an information imbalance, which is really, and I don't know where they are. So that's the problem with, it's the positive and negative within schools. And that's why they do it this way, so that you build your budget based on the needs of the children of the community, not on City Hall's needs, right? And so that you don't get police versus school, fire, let's even go prettier, fire versus school. You know what I mean? Like, so you don't have those two departments going after each other. That's why you have this kind of separate, that's why they set up, in my opinion, why they set up Massachusetts that way with the oversight of the school committee. So.
Can we go back to enrollment for a second? Because I just want to make another point that if
Is it
you're
up or
getting
down?
questions, it's up. Back.
Back. Yeah, what does up mean?
Yeah, one more. So I know I get this question a lot, and it comes up more at Frontier than Deerfield, but it's definitely come up on town meeting floor is, you know, why do you have school choice kids? You know, they're bringing in some money, but we're paying teachers. Look at our resident numbers. You could not have, I mean, I guess we could, but it would be complete blow to our community. You could have one classroom of 31 students. But likely, even if we did not have those school choice numbers, we're still having 2 sections, with the exception of probably first grade, still having 2 sections. we're not paying for staffing. We're using choice funds to help offset the budget, but we're not paying staffing specifically for school choice students.
Right.
I think that's a really good distinction for everyone to understand when you're having conversations with the public.
Right, and we made that decision last year on this one, as that we were going to do that to keep consistency two across and hope to backfill that with choice. So that costs a little bit smaller. I mean, what we've run into other towns as well is it's also the starting number of the class. And then we've seen kids leave. Like you lose the 3 resident kids and you're like, wait a minute, why are you this is particularly, we're talking about like Sunderland has this issue because they have two sections as well in some of their classes. And it's like, wait a minute, you could have ran that class with residents alone. Why'd you add choice? Well, when we opened and we started the class was at 26.
Right.
4 kids left, and now it's at 22. We could have done that, but we've already, once those students are in your school, you can't say, oh, we don't want you this year. No, once you make that decision, we make a decision. Not so much here. I'm just kind of bringing that out loud when you look at other schools that have done that.
So we really should be looking at a plan to get expenses off of school choice, not adding expenses to school choice, because we're going to need a multi-year plan as the revenue. And I can try to do some bigger projections for us that would show, if the school choice kids age out and we don't backfill all of them, what does that look like for revenue? Assume a 3% growth on COLA for the next 5 years. What does that look like for wages? I don't think it's even going to be 7 before we're at a point. And maybe that's part of our conversation is, let's deal with it down the road. Right now is what we really need to tackle and focus on, but it wouldn't be my recommended approach. And, we just have to strike the right balance with that.
So are other town departments also taking on their employees' health insurance?
I don't know.
Being asked to? We don't know.
I don't know.
Trying to remember what you said.
Just looking up the email right now because I kind of.
So if we look at this from I'm sorry, if Mary's question wasn't answered, if you're looking at it.
She's looking to see if there's
It does not mention any other departments.
Because if we're looking at a scale down and less of reliance on school choice, we really need to make steeper cuts if we're looking at a multi-year perspective to get the expenses down even more. Because if health insurance is a multi-year issue and we're going to be eating away at the pot of school choice, knowing that that's not going to be growing anymore, we're looking at steeper cuts over the next 2-3 years.
I think in the current year, if we can pull together what we've presented today to make the reductions of the 6th grade classroom and then the other 185,000, and if the town doesn't ask us to come to that 2.5%, we're okay with school choice where it is right now. And we can use some of it to offset the playground. I think if we can't pull together the 185,000 in additional cuts, and the town asks us to bring it down another 185,000, we do have a bigger school choice problem. But yes, to your point, the next 2, 3, 4 years, we're going to have to start pulling expenses off. Especially if we're using
It's coming.
300,000 to 400,000 for the playground.
And I would not get into let's cut more now to save later. It never seems to work. You know what I mean? Because it just gets backfilled with other.
No, I'm just thinking if we're looking at an issue of scale, which it seems like we are, like our supply and demand is out of whack. It's getting out of whack. And so trying to understand what this means for the identity and the land and kind of defining what the school is and who we serve and what our objectives are. I think just trying to understand that this is just helpful to let that stew.
So I think as far as school choice goes, I think the first step would be we come back next month and say, these are the positions / services that we're looking to cut. And we have that discussion as to whether or not we're willing, and you're willing as a committee, to make those reductions. And if not, then we're talking about using school choice money to fund them, because we do need to bring the budget down, the bottom line, whether it is in reduced positions or using a supplement fund.
And just to jump on that, so the timeline is we come into the February meeting and we're gonna make a budget that we're sending to public hearing on March 11th,
2 weeks later.
2 weeks later. So, that's why we thought it was important to have this here to kind of mull it over and, and so forth, that kind of where things are at. And how we get there. Then it goes to public hearing. You still can change it again after public hearing. You can bring it down, you just can't increase it. But between now and February, after this meeting, I'm going to reach out to both finance and select board and say, is there going to be a meeting of the minds of the budget once we get it on Friday, from the state, so we all have kind of, what we're playing with, about what we want to do there. And so there might be another meeting going on the books, about a joint meeting where, to have that conversation even before the public hearing, rather than doing it in isolation. Because I don't have the answer of, this number we can make work, or, they're going to say, you need to bring that down further, and then so forth. So it's kind of like the next step. It's a little foggy. It's not clearly defined exactly how because on good years, they never bug us. You know what I mean? Like when we said, 2 and 3 over before, they're like, thank you. That's great. That's, normal growth.
So if you go back to that last slide, just to recap what we're sort of still deliberating.
Sorry, I can't go faster than. Oh, yeah.
So we'll continue to review internal suggestions for cuts administratively. Darius and I will continue conversations with town officials. We will know better the impact of Frontier's budget on the town of Deerfield in the next week. And then we come back next month. Right?
Mhm.
So you'll have to have input, or conversations with the town. Because with the way you just outlined it, when you come back next month, it's not going to include taking on the health insurance.
Well,
The way it
Or you're
stands,
trying
the
to
way it
figure
stands
that out.
today, the way you just presented it. Unless there's some conversation, which
So-
I think we should be part of.
Yeah, I don't think that the letter that I got was not, it was not, I'm not sure if we're gonna suddenly change the structure of financing the school and its benefits. If the finance committee can just do that. Without a conversation with this group, also without a conversation with select board. I don't know where the authority lies, but it's set up that we don't oversee that. And so to suddenly say, oh, it's a high year, now you get to oversee it. I can see the pluses and minuses of the overseeing it, and all the elementaries are set up the same way. So, you're right on that. And so I want to say I'm not entertaining completely. I want to have a bigger conversation on that. And we end up going to public hearing with a higher budget. Then we come to public hearing with a higher budget. We have a little bit more flexibility. Although the timeline's gonna get really tight after that March deadline. Great.
because I think they are last Monday in April for town meeting, and they have to have their budget, I think, done a month before. They're posted in the warrant.
2 weeks, right?
2 weeks?
Yeah. But they're gonna want it
Yeah.
earlier, but I'm just saying the smaller towns sometimes go 2 weeks. They can fiddle around up to then.
How long does it take to get bids for the playground? Like, that does seem like we need to understand numbers and what that would do to school choice and for the finance committee to see that it's actually not 800 something thousand. It's gonna,
If we
If we
won't,
vote, though.
even if we had it in the queue to go ahead and do it, we wouldn't have the numbers.
Yeah.
It takes like 90 days.
At least.
So, if we look to get an idea, February, it's a relatively small job. Just in the scope of things of contractors, they'll be in and out in just, I would say, a few days.
The
Yeah,
problem is we're mandated by Mass General Law to post things for a certain length of time. And then you
Sure.
have to provide opportunities for questions, site visits, and some of the behind the scenes work that still would have to be done between the engineer and us and the person helping us put the package together. Like that can be lengthy just to get the bid documents ready. So, I mean, 60 days would be really hard. It's 90's more realistic.
Well, I'm again, reluctant to spend on school choice too quickly. I don't, if we go back to the town, here's our budget of 3%, we're sitting on 800,000 in school choice. That doesn't feel like we're showing them that we're operating in good faith there. So is it, we're saying we're committing to spending a certain amount of the playground, which our best guess is. Even then though, even if it's half of that, which is the playground, I just feel like the town is still going to feel we're not doing enough out of school choice. And there's, based on conversations I've heard from them last year, I know there's some people who feel that it shouldn't be as high as it is.
Yeah, it's been that way for years.
Yeah.
We've gotten the questions on school choice and how much money do you have and why are you sitting on
Punished for
that?
saving.
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah.
just for-
Well, preparing for a very potentially costly.
So the good news is we can use this saving to leverage us out of this moment with the decisions we make, but it's gonna leave us empty-handed.
If it's to offset wages though, it's just gonna be bigger,
just
which
pushing
we
the
went
button
through
on
when we ended up reducing 3 positions the last time, we had talked about,
yeah,
okay,
I
we need
think-
school choice to offset
yeah,
budget, but
I
then the
think-
next year it would be like a triple problem instead of just like.
I think we need to kind of prepare some, just putting some visuals about what does it look like? And what is our already track that we're on that is slowly depleting school choice, right? And what is is it a 5 or 6 year based on whatever, as Shelley said earlier, that she could put something like that possible together to say, this is what we're seeing, right? And share that information. You know what I mean? I think it's about, it really is about, having, not having all the information.
And I don't think everyone understands how much an out of district placement can cost and that we have to provide it. Like it is not a choice. We can do our best to serve in-house, but there may be a situation where legally we need to spend $150,000 in a year to
Right.
place somebody.
I think we can easily demonstrate also how revenue has already come down over the last few years, but expenses have not. So
Yeah.
there's definitely some materials we can put together for the town to help them better
Is,
understand.
is there, or an easy way to show the town how much we would have had to ask for them if we didn't have a school
Oh,
choice
yeah.
budget?
Right.
Yeah, it gets slippery because it's like, what is the staffing need in this building if you reduce it by that number of students? And when you look at those classrooms, you'll see where you need 2 sections of all that, but there's a lot of what ifs in there. And so you can have a kind of like this is an envelope number, but they'd have to take it in good faith rather than if someone could just kind of, well, yeah, but you could do this and you could move this and you only need 1 nurse and you only need 1, this based on you don't actually know the needs of.
I
Right.
was thinking we could probably go off in enrollment numbers. You have to look at the kids in front of you.
But at a minimum, our resident numbers, if nothing else, I mean, could we reduce at that point related service providers because it's less students? Could we reduce specials? Like those are the kinds of things we would be looking at, but you're not really reducing your grade level teachers or your instructional assistants.
And it gets to this weird kind of thing, like every other elementary school would love this problem. You have too much school choice. We're writing a check to you before we do our budget because the amount of school choice we have going out. And so the fact that it's kind of like there's this kind of, I don't know, most people who are talking illy about school choice don't realize that we are on top of it as a district all 5 towns are on top of it because we are winning the school choice game. Okay, it's a game that we didn't set up the rules to, and people are upset that we're, doing with that game. But if we were in the flip side, we'd be saying, okay, the first thing on the budget is we have to pay or $500,000 to school choice and charter going out. And then we're going to start in a deficit, and then we're going to figure out how we're going to cut teachers here to pay school choice going out. Instead, we're getting upset that you understand what the real argument is. You've saved too much money and put it on our taxpayers at 3% the last few years. You know what I mean? Like your budget, it's not like, look at the other elementary schools around us. They're 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. No one is coming in under 5 around us in elementary schools. And I'll have all that information for the next meeting too, because we're all sharing that so people have an idea. The fact that, we're going to propose something under 5, it's just kind of, I don't know, there's a, get you fired up and that kind of thing. Like there's been very good managing of our budgets and being fiscally responsible.
I can also put together what we have paid for capital projects with school choice money that has saved the town and the taxpayers. So
That is a really important one.
definitely done some things there.
All right.
My opinion at this point is, I think there's a lot of work, there's a lot of things you've taken off to bring the budget from 9.6 or 7, whatever, down to just a hair under 3. I am comfortable moving forward with that at this point. I don't really have the stomach to, at this point, say we're doing 2.5% minus health insurance.
So there's no action by the committee tonight, just kind of an understanding that this is the number we're at now. We will bring you the plan, what the numbers, what the 185 represents. And, look at school choice and the modeling of that. So we had that conversation. And maybe it's, maybe we invite, a conversation with the finance committee and select board, invite members from each committee to come to that meeting so that, I don't know, I'm trying to feel, we can feel out where they're at instead of doing a whole nother meeting. Maybe that'd be a meeting they could come here and attend here with us. They've done that in the past. Deerfield's been usually, those members have been pretty open to coming in and talking about it, and they'll have a better idea of their numbers as well. So, I don't know, we'll see. Well, I'll work on all that. I mean, there's a possibility we might be moving meetings around and that kind of stuff where we may have to go to them earlier. And of course, I'll let you guys all know, and either we formally make it a meeting or, we go, or, whatever the mix of the group is. So, it's just that it's a lot of, there's a lot of crowded dates because you're not the only budget that's upside down right now. So Shelley and I are doing a lot of visiting to towns and having conversations with select boards and finance committees because Sunderland's in very rough shape, very, very rough shape. And Whately is in semi-rough shape. Conway's okay. They're going to have something that's going to be somewhat palatable depending on where their health insurance and their town lands.
Yeah.
And then Frontier, some of their assessments might be crazy too. So.
And the other
Is the
schools
tech
don't
school
have that.
getting built too? I'm just thinking about the other,
What's that?
is there a tech school building?
So yeah, right. So the tech school is hard to it's hard to put a finger on because they increase their budget, but because it's based on enrollment, we only see how it hits enrollment in each town. And while there are school committee member, ours is Bob Decker's the school committee rep for town of Deerfield there's no real feedback loop and accountability to the tech school because there's so many towns into it and they keep getting hit up and down based on their enrollment. So, people are like, oh, tech school's up, and they go, you've increased enrollment. Oh, that makes sense. Well, they don't say, well, we've increased it by 6% on top of enrollment. They don't really talk about that as much. The number's just on a thing, and it's usually, oh, enrollment's down. You like tech? Oh, enrollment's slightly up. Oh, good, they're going there. That's great. I mean, there's never really that kind of like, how quickly is their budget going? I mean, there is some oversight, but just not at the town level where they're held accountable.
There's rarely a question about the text budget at any of our
I don't think I've
towns.
seen one in the 9 years I've been here. In 9 times 4, because I go to all 4 towns.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for all the work.
All right.
Okay, all right. So the next thing, so we'll revisit next month. Next thing on the
I think so.
agenda.
I said, I think so.
Next is to appoint a member to the superintendent, subcommittee, the superintendent's agreement. So a little over 2 years ago, starting 3 years ago, for the first time, we formed a subcommittee to write a superintendency agreement, which just formalized, put into place everything that had been happening with the 4 districts in Frontier. And it was approved 2 years ago. It has a clause in there that says it will be reviewed in 2 years. So here we are. So there'll be a subcommittee, put 1 member from each committee. And, I don't think it's a huge time commitment and, a couple meetings maybe. And then they will bring that back to the joint committee to vote on any changes. I can say that after we had the chairs meeting in December and there was some feedback on things that could be changed, tweaked. So there's some ideas to start with. So you're not starting from scratch. So is there anybody who would like to be part of that? I would do it if no one wants to. But Mary, did I cut you off? No.
Did I?
I think you might have.
I should probably do it then. I was like, this sounded familiar.
Yeah, I didn't do it.
I'm happy to do it.
Okay,
You sure?
Makes
You don't mind
sense.
doing it?
Yeah, makes sense, probably.
okay, alrighty. I
I'm
appoint
reviewing my
Andy
notes.
to the subcommittee. Okay, all right, reports. I have no report. Their collaborative report.
The search committee put forward 5 candidates for interview, one of which is extremely controversial and has been receiving letters from teachers union all around the area. That's kind of where the collaborative stands. They are still, despite all of their cuts, facing pretty significant financial challenges. So.
Thank you. All right, superintendent's report.
I had a really short report that I emailed you. It included just a timeline for the state budget to remind those how that process works. And then the other thing was the graduation. The graduation council came forward with its initial recommendations for the changing graduation requirements. It's not obviously affect the elementary, but you can see how that trickles on. I've been asked to serve on the committee to review the next step. I think it was because I wrote really bold statements in their survey they sent us. So I don't know if that's good or bad. So it's kind of sassy, isn't it? So I'll let you know. So I'll have a little bit more knowledge about what's going on in next steps. So anyway, that's what's going on there. So.
Well, thanks for working on that.
Hmm.
Thank you for working on that. All right. No one has any other business to go over? I would be looking for motion to adjourn.
So move.
Thank you, Mary.
Seconded.
All right. All in favor? All right, I vote meeting adjourned at 6:18.